Hello, and welcome back to the Glass Prism podcast. For this episode, we are joined with Mr. Luki Danukarjanto. He's an author, podcast host, founder of Focus Inspired, and career coach, or as he would like to call himself, a career catalyst. Everyone appreciates that attempting to balance our work and family commitments in the 21st century seems like a herculean effort. So, during these trying times of human history, many of us wonder what the landscape for our lives and careers would look like. Luki is here to shed some light on what it means to find meaning in one's career, why most people have jobs, not a career, the nuances and complexities of fulfillment through work, and why we have a complicated relationship with motivation. This is the Glass Prism podcast. Enjoy. All right, so you have had one of the more interesting career path choices among those I've met. You started as a computer scientist, moved into management consulting, then entrepreneurship, basically a varied garden of expertise. Now you're here helping people like me at university, and as you describe your current job, as a career catalyst who found his purpose, helping others find theirs. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about yourself. How did you end up doing so many different things and what you do now?
Well, I would probably say a lot of it is kind of dumb luck, right? So if you go back in time and pick me out as kind of that computer scientist, right? So that was my parents wanting me to become a doctor. Apparently, I was named Luki. Saint Luke is the patron saint of doctors. I never really took to kind of like the medical field or whatever, but I was interested in kind of science and tech. My dad was an engineer. He worked at IBM. Following your dad's footsteps is oftentimes, or one of your parents' footsteps, is pretty common. So if he worked at IBM for a long time, so I thought, why not, right? And a lot of my friends were in that area too. So it seemed like a logical decision and a choice. And then the dumb luck comes in where I graduated in the dot-com bubble when it burst and couldn't get a job, right? So I was scrounging around looking for jobs, right? I had a few opportunities because co-op, I did co-op, which back then wasn't as readily available as it was now. So the fact that I had some work experience actually got me a few opportunities. But one was a friend's brother worked at a company, and he helped me get an interview, and I got a job. So the dumb luck was that was a management consulting company, right? So I thought I was going to be working for an accounting company, right? So I was working for one of the big four. I'm like, I don't really want to do technology coding for an accounting firm, but I didn't really know what this consulting was. So I started there, and then I grew up in the firm from tech to business, right? So I started coding, and then I became like a technical lead, and then more business analysis and project management, testing, training, and all that sort of stuff. And so I had a fun career there. I was there for over 12 years doing a whole bunch of interesting things, mostly around North America, mostly in the US. But yeah, it was a great time. And then the main transition point was family. I guess that part's not really dumb luck. that was purposeful. But then having to think about like, what do I want to do? And then eventually stumbling upon with a lot of mentoring conversations and soul searching, self-reflecting, watching a lot of, or actually listening to a lot of podcasts and reading a lot of books, I found that kind of coaching, career coaching was that path for me, right? So yeah, and then now I've done a whole bunch of stuff. So wrote a book called Swike, Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, which, I mean, growing up as a computer scientist, a shy, introverted kid, I never thought I'd write a book. And if I did write a book, it'd be like a technical manual of some sort. And starting a podcast, I never thought I would have my own podcast, let alone be on a podcast, that sort of thing, right? And I have a whole bunch of videos and a lot more things along the way. So yeah, a lot of it is a little bit of dumb luck. A lot of it is maybe putting myself in the right situations, that sort of thing. But it was one where I think it goes down to kind of curiosity and actually challenging a little bit, where I guess going back to the topic of this discussion on kind of career potential, it's figuring out like, what is that for me, and can I actually achieve it, right? So that's kind of the story in a nutshell, and happy to dive into any ones or head into another direction if you want.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Actually, I wanted to know about what was the switch, like the mental switch that took you from a shy computer scientist to one that has a very extensive portfolio like you. Like, is there anything that you can go back in retrospect and think to yourself that this is the point of transition right here?
So there is one where, again, I don't think it's a switch in the sense it turned on and off, but it might have been more kind of that catalyst and the trigger to slowly get to where it was. So if I said that it's not going from 0 to 100, it was allowing it to go from 0 to 1, and then from 1 to 2 and 3 and 4. So I recall a time in university where, computer science, I was shy and introverted. I had a total of, I think, 2 friends. And I recall sitting, and you're sitting at UT Scarborough in one of the wings. I think it's the H wing. They have these couches, or they used to. I don't know if I think they still have them. And that's where I would sit and have lunch, right? And then I wanted to be on my own because there were people that were sitting beside me, and I didn't want that. So I found kind of those study cubes, like those desks at the far corner, where you basically had 3 walls, 3 partitions, where you have a little bit of privacy. And that was my first and second and third year, right? I would go into there, find one of those study cubes. I'd go to class, study cube, lunch, class, study cube, and basically my university career kind of sucked. Right? It was pretty, not fun. It's not what most people think about university, like partying and going out to events and making new friends and stuff like that. Mine was very restrictive. So essentially, I had a point where I kind of said, is this it? Is this what it comes down to? So it was actually a point of like, WTF, what am I doing here? Right? I had a conversation, and that was kind of the catalyzing moment where I had a conversation with someone beside me. And that kind of pushed me over to, okay, that conversation was pretty horrible. It wasn't very good. But then that went from 0 to 1. And then eventually that 1 to 2 to 2 to 3, and so on and so forth. And you can put the whatever podcast as whatever, 70 to 71, that sort of stuff, a book into whatever, and you can probably up those numbers. Now, I'm not the best communicator in the world, but I'm getting better and better every day.
That's wonderful to see. I mean, when you tell me more about your history and you tell me how shy you were, and it's the total antagonist of what I think of you as, because we've had a couple conversations now. You tell me that you're not the best communicator. I beg to differ. You're very good at communicating. And well, it's one of the things that you end up evolving as you go, especially now that you've done a podcast and you've actually written down your thoughts and set it up in the format of a book to help others as well. And definitely the career choice that you ended up picking, man, is very different from where you started off as, in terms of characteristics that I imagine an individual that is not as outgoing in university ends up in 30 years time. That's unreal, man. Like, I wonder if this is a pro to you. I wonder if you're looking back and think to yourself like, I'm so glad that change happened.
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm so glad that happened. Now, there's a whole bunch of things that I wish wouldn't have happened, I guess. And a whole point of having the swipe, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, is I wish that young me would have had a different perspectives, expectations, or information, and sometimes opportunity just to go out and do it. Because a lot of folks, they have these certain thoughts of what their future is supposed to be, right? And I don't like the word like supposed and should, and they go on to it without actually thinking about, well, what do you really want to be doing, right? Versus what you should and supposed to be doing. I was definitely locked into that. So sometimes changing it can be a very defining moment.
So what are those expectations that you talked about? You mentioned that like, I wish I had a different set of expectations, different set of goals. If you can talk to a 21-year-old Luki, what would you say to him?
Well, that's assuming 21-year-old Luki would actually listen, but at least I can kind of start planting seeds. Because, it could be like Asian upbringing or just the family where you need to grow up, you need to go to university, you need to get a good job. ideally in one of those typical like doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer type of things. That's kind of the standard play, and basically be independent, self-sufficient. Hopefully, get a few promotions along the way. Hopefully, buy a house, have a family, and grow up in raise them up in the suburbs, that sort of thing, and white picket fence and a dog and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of the typical, right? The expectation is get good grades, right? You have to get good grades so you can go to a good university, so you can get a good job, and then get a good job so you can do all that stuff that I talk about. That was the expectations. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with them, right? It's one of those things where it's useful, but I never necessarily had the benefit of kind of having entrepreneurial influences, which nowadays where I'm not an entrepreneur, but I believe I have entrepreneurial tendencies, right? I always start something new, and I love building and creating things, right? But based on kind of those previous expectations, I was pretty scared. Like I didn't want to go against whatever other people did. I would say that I probably did computer science because most of my friends were doing some sort of engineering or tech or something, and I unfortunately didn't get into engineering, so I had to go to computer science, right? So that was kind of the expectations on that side, right? But I'm sure everyone has them for themselves, right? Whatever they might be, it might be school, it might be a certain job, it might be a certain lifestyle or whatever. But everyone has them, and oftentimes if you take a minute to kind of examine which ones are actually the ones that you want to subscribe to and the ones that you want to follow and achieve versus what came from mom and dad, what came from family culture or somewhere, right? Sometimes it came from somewhere where I'll often work with folks and they'll say, yeah, why do I want to get an MBA? Or why do I want to do this and that, right? Like they just thought, well, doesn't everybody? Like, well, no, that's not how it is. Some people do, but not everyone does, right? So those are some of the expectations, and for everyone, it's going to be a little bit individual.
You mentioned the idea that a lot of people do pick things because of the fact that other people are doing it. Basically, I'd like to believe that one of the things that is most important. This is a theme that is very much emphasized even in your work, and that regarding finding your purpose. Those two things are very much in contention. You can't follow everyone else and find your own purpose and work for it, right? So what is one's purpose? What does that mean? And is it feasible to suggest that people can monetize their purpose in life so it's more in line with their career opportunities? Because it does seem like following wherever people go, because they end up obviously eventually employed, getting a master's, getting this, getting that, like, yeah, we'll get you a job. Following your purpose is a risk to many people, right? So what do you say to those people?
Well, after taking a lot of time to figure out like purpose and what that means and all that sort of stuff, like what I've come to understand, and it could change a couple of years down the line, but what I've come to understand is the purpose of life is to live life purposefully. And what that means is that you're making the conscious decision at any point in time to do whatever it is that you're doing right now, whether it be in school and getting that degree that your parents want you to get, or the family and all your ancestors have worked long and hard to kind of build the family reputation to a certain one. Are you the one consciously making the decision, or are you working based on someone else's expectations? Right now, that could mean that you become whatever, a very successful accountant, lawyer, doctor, and engineer, and you do all those things. Because I'm not by any means kind of bashing those professions, because they're great, they're amazing. But what I often have concerns with is when that is the desires of someone else that's not you, right? So I think when you say what is your purpose, one of the operative words there is your, right? Is the purpose that someone handed down to you and gave it to you. And oftentimes I'll talk to students or young folks, and they don't even know. When I ask them, what do you want? They have no idea, right? They haven't even actually thought of it, because since school, right, mom and dad told me that I have to take these lessons and that lessons. I have to go to this school or that school and get this type of job. And then they're out in the real world and they're supposed to fend for themselves, and they don't know, right? So purpose can lie on a huge spectrum of things, where like some people think it's your passion, right? doing things that you love, right? And purpose and passion aren't necessarily synonymous, right? So those are actually two different things. And I think it's more of on a spectrum, right? Where hopefully you do enjoy what you do, right? And hopefully it does provide some sort of impact in others, right? So when we talk about these words, I'd want folks to really be clear on what it means for them, right? When we talk about purpose, what does that mean? Does that mean like fulfillment? Does that mean just having fun and then enjoying life, that sort of thing? Or is it leaving a legacy for what you're able to do later on, right? So, and then oftentimes the conversation goes on to like, what is success, right? Because you want to be successful in what you do, and that should be your purpose, right? But maybe not, right? Because people's ideas of success are different, right? So I'm very kind of into the meaning of words, and not necessarily the dictionary definitions, but what do you give that word, or how do you give meaning to the word that it is? So purpose, success, happiness. Like, what is happiness? Right? That's a very broad question. What is success? What is the purpose? Right? And if you take a minute to actually think about those things, then it is very eye-opening for those to actually be able to achieve any one of those things.
Yeah, for many people, those questions are very general. Like, I'm pretty sure at some point in time, everyone has considered these questions at some point in their lives. I would say even starting from university, like a lot of people would be questioning why they get into what they get into, right? The question here is, how can I simplify that formula? Because it seems like a very broad question in and of itself. Even if I do find a thing that makes me happy just by doing it as a job, for example, it's very difficult to think to myself, then what are the next steps, right? What are the questions that are going to let me first find out what my purpose is, find out what I'm going to do with that purpose to monetize it, to potentially turn it into a career, and then find out if it's going to be worth it, and all of these kind of evaluations. It's definitely one of those things that are daunting and overwhelming to some, right? Especially when they're goaded by a lot of their support systems into getting into the things that aren't necessarily what they wanted to do in the first place. So all of these things are combating. My question here is, what are the questions that I should be asking myself to find out and understand where my career path lies?
Yeah, I mean, one of the basic questions that I ask folks is, what do you want? Right. And how many people can actually answer that question? Right. What do you want? Right. So I want to open up my own scuba dive shop in Thailand. Right. Okay. So why don't you do that?
That seems exotic. I like it.
Well, it's one of my friends actually did that. Right. So which is why I kind of bring it up. But what is it that you actually want? Right. And if you don't have a clear understanding of what that is, well, I want a job that challenges me, that where I can work with smart people, and where I can make a meaning and impact and influence and leave a legacy and find that I helped. Okay, well, you can do that in pretty much any job, right? Presumably jobs exist because you're helping someone, you're providing impact. Now, some of them might have different levels and scales, because when you're doing that as, let's say, a teacher or professor, you have a different impact than if you are like sanitation and maintenance. So if you're just picking up garbage, right? But those jobs have a lot of value. I recall apparently John F. Kennedy, when he was taking a tour of like NASA, the Space Administration, he went up to one of the janitors, the custodians that would take care of him, and he asked that person, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "Sir, I'm putting a man on the moon." Right? Even though his job was to mop the floors. But he understood that his purpose as part of the whole organization was to fulfill that kind of greater meaning of putting a man
focusing on the bigger picture. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love it if there's kind of more specifics, because these are all kind of the generalities. But first of all, starting with what they want, right? And then decomposing all those sort of things, right? And again, that operative word is, what do you want? Right? Not what does mom and dad want for you, not what does friends and family want for you, but what do you want? And then, well, if that's really what you want, then the next question is why, right? Because if the answer is, well, because everybody else is doing it, well, because I could be rich and then retire and whatever, or something, versus no, this actually is something that I love and I would be able to do it, and it's something internal to me that I want to continue doing it, then the next step is just how do you get it? Like what's in your way? Who do you need to become? What are the resources that you need? What's the experience and all that sort of stuff? So I think those are the three basic questions. Now, as you unpack all those questions, there's usually a lot of things underneath there that need to be dealt with, right? Because it's, well, your mom and dad are paying for your tuition, for your rent and your housing, whatever, right? And they want you to go down a certain path. So either you stop taking their money, or you do as you're told, right? And then it's a decision, right? And neither of them are right or wrong. It's just a decision that you have to make, right? And then there's everything in between, right? Because it's not necessarily one or the other. Sometimes it's a conversation with mom and dad to say, well, this is what you want, this is what I want, right? How do we kind of find a middle way, a middle ground, or not, right? And with a lot of folks, it's mom and dad want you to get a degree and a job in this, so do it, right? But once you're 25, 30 and you're settled in, then you're your own person and do whatever you want, right? Because life is long, right? Just because you decide to change and say, you know what, mom and dad, I gave this a shot and it made me happy. It didn't make me happy, right? And this is what I want to do. Because sometimes mom and dad know more than you think, right? But sometimes they don't, right? And if you don't have the conversations and communicate, that's what you need. So going back to your question, what and then why, and then you'll be able to figure out how. Or you can leverage someone like me to kind of help you guide you along the way.
So we were talking about these questions about finding the what you want and the whys and everything within the parameters of a career. Now, there's a lot of people that would argue that maybe trying to find a satisfactory career choice in a sense where it provides you fulfillment is a dead-end endeavor. Like, you shouldn't go for that. Like, you really do need to think about the most important things in life, and that is trying to find opportunities to spend more time with your family and friends. So I want to pick your brain quite generally about the translation of meaning and purpose and general satisfaction and fulfillment into a career with the context of what I just brought up. Because I know many of us, when we think about, for example, our most memorable times in our lives, we do not think about the time we sat across the table in the staff room with a mug of coffee with Janet. We think of times with friends and family. Especially in the 21st century, there seems to be less of an opportunity to spend time not being productive career-wise and more or less sacrifice time spent making life worthwhile, doing things outside of work. So what are your thoughts on our society being career driven, even though many argue that this is not a natural state of being and should change for people to satisfy themselves, but maximizing leisure to satisfy that need?
So one perspective is that, fulfillment or purpose and all that sort of stuff that happens in life is less about what you do and more about being about who you are and how you show up at work.
Okay.
And here's what I mean by that, because I believe that if I decided to do pretty much any job, whatever it is, I would have fun because I have an attitude where I would make this the best opportunity ever, right? So I was chatting with my kid who they were online at a Zoom party and whatever, and he said, "Well, this party is boring." Right? Because he wasn't having fun. But then everybody else on the call was enjoying themselves and having a good time. So I said, well, is the party boring or are you boring? Right? So my perspective on what I'm saying here is, well, is it the world? Is it something out there that's supposed to fulfill you and allow you to have a good time with friends and family? Or is it you? Right? So everyone can spend more time with friends and family. They're just choosing to do so in the context of being an accountant, an engineer, or whatever, HR, marketing professional, a podcast host, a sanitation engineer, whatever, right? Like, I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive, right? And if someone does, then I'd probably want to have a conversation to understand why they think so. Because if you show up in whatever job that you want and you have an amazing time and you do it in the best of your ability, right? And you find ways to do it better and nicer or whatever, right? And you have that attitude like, well, what is this job doing? It's allowing me to provide for my friends and family to have time on the evenings and weekends to be able to pay for that dinner, that cottage, that plane trip or whatever, right? So that allows you to fund some of that. So I mean, this is one where in these generalities, it's quite hard, right? Because there's too many circumstances and too many different scenarios. But if there's kind of a specific scenario, because yeah, I get that people want to spend more time on friends and family, and certain jobs have a higher expectation of different work commitments. But if, let's say, you work in the kind of reputation of like a public sector, right? A civil servant where you're only working kind of like 8:30 to 4:30 and you're done, right? That you have much more time for friends and family than being like an accountant in busy season where you're expected to work from 9 to 9 and then weekends and sometimes overnight in order to get your files done, right? Well, but whose choice was that? Was it society's choice? It's really up to you. So if you are an accountant, why did you choose to be an accountant? Why didn't you choose to do something else? Right. This probably isn't answering your question, but I would like people to kind of decompose some of those assumptions they have in that process. Right. And to your point about kind of following your purpose and passion and doing something that otherwise doesn't seem kind of productive. There's a quote that I quite like. It says, when you do something you love, you never have to work a day in your life. So why aren't you doing something that you love? Because I can honestly say that a lot of the stuff I do, I love doing it. It's amazing. Now there's some points that I don't like, obviously, but some of the stuff that I really love. So it doesn't even feel like I'm working, right? So why not find something like that? Now, a lot of people, what they don't necessarily do is invest the time to become great at something. They're good, they're not bad, but would you rather work with someone who is the best at something, or someone that's kind of mediocre at what they do, right? Like you can pretty much get paid really good money to do pretty much anything, right? Like take a look at some of the YouTubers out there, right? The ones my kids watch, they like open up toys, right? Play video games all day. People, they put on makeup, they do exercise videos, right? Whatever they love doing, you can find something, and they're probably making a decent amount of money, if not a good amount of money, right? They're probably making more than a lot of accountants and doctors and engineers out there too, right? But those are the ones that are great. The ones that are good, they might be making a little bit less, but again, they're doing stuff that they love, right? So I would, for any of those scenarios, I would definitely want to challenge some of the perspectives that people have in terms of limiting themselves and on finding all these. Because if they can kind of challenge their preconceived notions of why can't you do it? Like, what's stopping you? Whose judgment is often in the way of you doing what you want, right? And if people talk about like the practicalities of, oh well, but then I can't afford to live in downtown Toronto. It's like, well, you make a choice. Why do you have to live in downtown Toronto? Why can't you go off to the suburbs where housing is 1/10 the cost than to go having prime real estate downtown? So you make a choice. Do you want to do that, or choose something that you love? And the thing is, I don't think it's necessarily mutually exclusive too. Because again, if you get to the point where you are good enough and you love what you're doing, and people value what it is that you do, then the money eventually comes, right? Because a lot of those people online, they didn't start with the notion that they were going to make thousands, tens of thousands, millions of dollars off their YouTube channel. They probably thought, hey, this is kind of cool, fun, and wow, I make some money doing it. Maybe I'll pour in some more money. I'm sure some of them had that ambition and expectation, but yeah. So I would encourage folks to think in slightly different terms. And again, it doesn't have to be that everyone starts their own YouTube channel or whatever to get paid by that. But there are definitely tons of other unconventional ways of kind of getting what you want in terms of like a practical kind of monetary income, and actually doing things that you enjoy and love. Not sure if that's getting to what you're asking.
No, it definitely is. It's showcasing that there's a dichotomy of people who believe that, one, you need to devote yourself into your career as if it was something that you enjoy, and enjoy the time with your family and friends, and that balance is what makes you successful, right? And then those who strictly believe that, doing a job is doing a job, and doing a job just basically means that you get to pay the bills so that you can survive another day. Now, you mentioned that you don't quite understand why someone would ever think to themselves, what is it that makes a career seem illogical to take up as something that is also a source of happiness, right? Am I getting that right? So in that case, I imagine like even those who really do enjoy their jobs, they would never think to themselves, oh, you know what? That time during retirement, I really don't want that. I really don't want to ever retire. Because if the goal was to find passion in your job, then you shouldn't be seeking retirement.
Well, so that's a good point. Where, in the sense, like, what is the purpose of retirement?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. To me, it seems like, okay, you're old enough now to not be as productive as the next other person that might be wanting that job. You know, yeah, that makes logical sense to me. But is there something I'm not picking up there?
Well, so for me, like I am of that mindset where I don't feel that I will retire, right? Okay. I will stop working for money that is necessary for me to kind of pay the day-to-day bills. Now, if you consider that retirement, that's what I'll be doing hopefully sooner than later, right? But essentially, I mean, it comes from kind of the previous notion of what work was, where you did it kind of as a grind, as a hustle to pay the bills so that you could trudge through it so that you can eventually have some time to enjoy life, right, in doing what you do. Because people, well, I often talk to folks, well, what is the difference between a job and a career? Right? Mm-hmm. I often say that a job is what you do from 9 to 5 to pay the expenses.
So most people do have jobs, basically. Not many people have careers. So
that's what I would argue, right? But some people can turn their job into a career because they show up every day and say, you know what, whatever it is, I work at a quick serve restaurant or whatever. I work in retail sales or whatever. And some people love it. They feel it's a challenge. Like, how can I get more smiles from people? How can I do it a little bit quicker and faster? And when you tend to approach life with that attitude, then things become better. Then more opportunities come to you, so you can do other different things. So going back to my earlier point about, well, is it up to the job to make you happy, or is it up to you to make you happy in the job? And then that carries on and then probably affects a lot of different things in your life that can help you improve, right? So it's definitely one where people can choose to do whatever they want. Right? They can choose to go to a job and just from 9 to 5, they kind of park that, do whatever they need to, and then have tons of fun at home, right? When they're back with their family and on the weekends and all that stuff. I think that's perfect. And if they're happy in their life and they love that's amazing. Like mm-hmm. That's what I would want for everybody. Now, wonderful. It's the people who complain about that I have question with, right? So, because I do have a lot of friends, a couple of them that they don't make as much as I do or the other friends, but they're immensely happy. They're content. They just love living simply. Like a few vacations here and there that they might splurge on certain things. They kind of coupon clip and penny pinch a little bit on the stuff that's not relevant, and they splurge on the stuff that they love. Right? Nothing wrong with that. Like they don't have to be making like $1 billion or $1 trillion. Like they don't have to be doing the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos stuff in the world, right? The Oprah Winfrey's, and just kind of help be able to kind of influence all of society. They don't have to do that. They could just be within their world. They are influencing, making the best influence in their own world, right? That I have no qualms about. I think that again is something that everybody should have. It's the people who start to complain and whine about why this, why that. Then I take a little bit of issue on that side, right? So
that's fair. I mean, there is a sense of cognitive dissonance when you consider. I'm pretty sure a lot of the things that we've discussed so far have been packaged and delivered to many people through conversations with friends and family who are supportive of the fact that, you know, you should pursue something that will make you happy, right? But yet, even those people don't seem to be convinced. And this happens all the time as well. For example, I'm always intrigued in knowing what the obstacles are in my life that controvert my path to achieving the things in life that I want to achieve, right? So I've heard many speakers, like motivational speakers, you know, you basically say like, change this and you'll get here, or change that and you'll be happy. Now, though admittedly, those motivational speakers do induce a fleeting yet temporally effective dose of motivation, I don't seem to get much after I leave the presentation hall. Like, what does it take for me to maintain that motivation and convince myself, okay, I really do need to focus on what makes me happy, what's my purpose and meaning, rather than following what everyone else is doing? Because truly, the societal expectation is quite a heavy load to carry. And it's very hard to imagine that people are just doing it nonsensically. You know what I mean? So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about motivation and once you know what you want, so you want to buck the trend that everybody is following and you want to go against it, right? So can we turn that into a more specific example? Because when it's in generalities, it becomes a little bit more difficult because there's too many scenarios there. But do you have a specific one? So, and it can be hypothetical. Do you have a friend, quote unquote, that wants to make this type of decision and is looking for motivation to do that? Like what could you kind of tangibly, so that we can walk through that example as a little bit indicative?
Oh, there are many examples of this. I believe a lot of the people that are listening to this actually do sympathize with this very sentiment and the idea that I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just following everyone else. For example, there are many people who go into the health sciences envisioning themselves as physicians in the future. Okay. I was in the health sciences. I went into neuroscience. I found something that I'm really passionate about. And that is, I would like to do what Neuralink is doing right now regarding machine learning and integrating the brain functions with technology. I really do think that the format of life becomes not only much easier, but much more productive. I think the format of using your phone and laptop to do things isn't that effective. So that, for me, is a purpose. Now, for many of the people who did go into the health sciences, including some friends, they'll go in to become a doctor, very intelligent people, mind you. So these are people who are very, very active on campus, in their education. Now, one of the most important questions that I asked them that makes it seem like whatever they're seeking isn't necessarily grounded is that, like, how satisfied are physicians that you've talked to? And they'll say, well, I've talked to one or two physicians, not many. And the problem is, like, what type of physician do you want to be? Those are things that they only think about later. It makes it seem like the goal is so broad that it's very hard to convince me that they ever wanted to be a physician in the first place. They're just really in tune with the fact that they want to succeed. That's it. That's really it. And like whatever success is defined by society, even if they did integrate it as their own, it's they, like, for example, I'm not sure if you've seen the statistic, is that I think this statistic was taken from the US, and that is 50% of physicians wouldn't go through the medical route if they had the choice to do it again. Okay, so that is a very high number, especially since you need to give up a lot to become a physician. And if you become a physician, you've given up the majority of your life to be one. And once you're there, that's such a hard position to be in, to realize you've given up so much to realize that you don't like it, right?
I mean, it pulls together a lot of what we've talked about earlier, right? And it goes back to what I mentioned before about my approach. It's basically, what do you want? Why do you want it? And then the how kind of manifests itself. So what do you want? They want to be a doctor, right? And then it goes back to why, right? Well, because it'll help me be successful. Because being able to be called like Dr. Luki makes me successful, instead of just being Luki, right? It's the prestige. It could be that. It could be, well, doctors make a bunch of money, so I can provide for my family, right? Doctors get to help people, right? And that's what I want to do. And to your point about what type of doctor, because there's so many different types, right? Like a family physician is going to be different than a neurosurgeon, which is going to be different than a chiropractor or an oncologist or whatever, right? I don't know all the different doctor terms, but like they're all going to be different. And then continuing on that, why, right? Is there a specific area where, well, your aunt was suffered through cancer for her whole life, so I want to become a doctor in cancer care because I've seen what the challenges people have gone through, and I want to provide that care for people in the future. Well, then that seems a little bit more of a driving force, right? So exercise that folks can do is actually one that I call it the 5 whys, right? And basically, so I want to become a doctor. Why? Right? And then what you want to ask is, for whatever you answer for that why is that important to you? And then whatever answer you give, ask yourself again, why is that important to you? Why is that important to you? And if you can do that 5 times without repeating or saying kind of these generalities, right, then you'll often get to a core reason of why. And that, taking that purpose, next time you have to do an exam, or next time you have to study for this and that, or next time you lose your weekend because you have to do some clinical work or whatever, and bring that why to you, that can be very driving and definitely something that is a motivator to do that. And you can do that with pretty much anything, right? It doesn't have to become your career path. It could be starting a new exercise regime. It could be making healthier food choices, or learning a new language, whatever it is. If you go back to the why, and if you don't have that core why, then it becomes a little bit more superficial, right? Because it's just like, oh, I'm doing it just because, right? The other part is to have someone help you, right? The reason why things like study buddies and gym buddies and all that sort of stuff work is because some people need that external accountability. They need someone that counts on them to be able to do it, and then they can get stuff done, right? So if we talk about that motivation and becoming successful, going back to that why, will definitely help a lot of people. And the other part, having someone to hold them accountable, right? In able to do it. Now, our parents do that a lot because they want you to become whatever it is that you decide to do, right? But afterwards, once you reach that, like it's not your parents saying that now you have to get promoted or go to a bigger hospital or like serve more patients or whatever. Your parents aren't going to give you that sort of accountability, right? Well, maybe some would, but very few are probably going to do that. So then people lose direction or change direction because of stuff like that, right? So if they can find a lot of that in themselves or with another group of people that are similarly motivated or whatever, then there's a lot more progress and success that can be achieved in that sense. That gives you a satisfactory answer, right? Again, because it's so specific and often depending on the particular person and the circumstances, but in generality, that's kind of where you'd want to focus on.
Yeah, because we could have a whole podcast regarding like every single career path, and we can think to ourselves like, okay, if you want to go into this, here's what the things, and people listen to this podcast, they'll realize very quickly that, yeah, there's no path that you can use as a general formula for getting everywhere that you want to go, right? So definitely this is one of those episodes that I'm intending to set as a precedent for those who are a little bit lost. And that's many of us, to be honest with you, especially during these times, who are considering like they're at the very first stages of what my career should look like. And this was a wonderful conversation, man. Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Well, I hope it was helpful. And I know we kind of just started scratching the surface, but again, hopefully it gives the listeners a bit of encouragement. So I encourage folks to think about, again, what it is they want. Another tangible exercise that I encourage folks to do, even if you're in university, even if you're high school, right, if you can, is to write your retirement memo. Imagine that you're 65 and your career pretty much ended up exactly as you'd hoped. What happened? Right. And you could have a few different flavors, right? If you're contemplating like the medical route or going the engineering, or if you want to start your own side hustle on the side or go full entrepreneur or whatever, like you might have 4 or 5 or 10 different retirement memo flavors, right? And the interesting thing is, as you start going through that exercise, there'll be a whole bunch of vagueness that you can't attribute to because you won't know a whole bunch of things. But there are certain things that are going to be more compelling. You're like, oh, wow, even though I have no idea what this would bring, this sounds like it would be cool and interesting. And then you'll also try to uncover again, or ask yourself during the process, why? Why is this important to me? Why would I want to do it? And you'll try to figure out whether or not that actually is something that you wanted to do, or if it came from somewhere. And realizing that can change, right? Because the thing is, if you're in university and high school, even working for a few years, you've only experienced so little, right? There's so much more in the world and everything that, like Neuralink didn't exist, 3 years ago, right? So how could you possibly be interested and passionate, or know you would be interested or passionate about it until it came? And the world changes and you change. So doing that exercise, I don't know, every year, every quarter if you really don't know what you want to do, and add to it the new experiences and information you had in order to do that. So if you couple that with things like the 5 whys exercise or whatever, then you'll be on your way to success, and making sure that you're exploring all those things and allocating the time. I think that's one of the important things, is blocking off time to actually do this stuff, because you do the exercise and yes, you write it down, and then it sits in a drawer until you retire for real, right? So the fact that you say, no, you know what, I'm going to spend an hour a day on this. I'm going to spend multiple hours a week on this, right? Then that's when you have a chance to kind of hit your potential and reach your purpose, your passion, whatever it is, and course correct along the way. Because with all of that, you're making a whole bunch of assumptions, which might hold or might not hold, right? So, and yeah, if you need the help, seek it out, because there's a lot of people that have been there and done that. Could be friends, could be family, could be folks like me, right? That could help you on that journey. So yeah, and at the end of the day, enjoy it, right? Because you might as well if you're there anyway. So hopefully that's some useful advice.
Yeah, what a wonderful conclusion to such a interesting podcast episode. And I think personally, this is very insightful for many. It's eye-opening as well. So rewinding back to what you mentioned about your story at the beginning of the episode as well, like clearly the positions that you put yourself through gave you those opportunities where you were like, I want to try this, right? And that's what basically decided the trajectory for you. And you finally found something that you truly enjoy. So thank you so much, Luki. I really, really, really do appreciate this. This is wonderful. And thank you again for your time.
My pleasure. And thanks for having me.